Yo, what's going on, Sebastian?
Much, Danny. How are you doing? It's good to see
I'm
you.
doing well. Yeah, good to
Yeah,
see you too. I really appreciate these weekly meetings.
it's, it's a lot of fun. No, it's a great way to spend a Wednesday morning. Looks kind of
Yeah,
dreary outside, so this is
right.
um warm and dry within my little home here, which is
That's
nice.
right. Yeah, warm and dry, just like our
Yeah,
podcast.
yes, yeah, and I'm probably
And
sounding a little bit better too because we've stacked my microphone on top of a couple old anthologies.
yeah, and I didn't even know you had a microphone all this time.
I know it was hidden because I felt like it was throwing off the aesthetics to have it like in the corner because it's not as nice looking as your microphone. Yours I had like a little bit of envy, maybe. I don't know.
Okay. I think, well, maybe we should lobby the Arthur board to get you the exact same mic that I have and the same arm. Then we would be as very aesthetically like symmetrical.
Wow, that would be amazing. I used to have a microphone stand that I pushed up over my desk when I was recording a radio show. So the microphone would be like right in front of my face here. So maybe I should bring
Okay.
that back. Who knows?
Who knows? Who knows?
We'll
Anyways, we're
we'll see.
looking great, obviously, if you're
Oh,
watching on YouTube or Twitch, and we're sounding great if you're listening on the trentarthur.ca, our website, or Spotify. We're also on Google Podcasts. Although it takes a couple days to get all the way to Google Podcasts. I don't know why. But we have a wonderful show planned. We're gonna talk about Stephen Wright not running for mayor again. Uncertain as if he made that choice himself or it was just a slip, just an error. Also, Jeff Leal might have had a couple conflicts of interest in the campaign money that he received during his run for mayor as well. So some interesting developments there. CCTV is coming to a intersection downtown near you, which means, the official Peterborough Police state has arrived. We also have some interesting drama over the new addiction treatment facility and Dave Smith's reaction to the reaction. He was the one who made an announcement, and then some reporters from Chex or Global News
yeah.
reported on it, and he clarified something that we will get to later on. There's also a
Hmm.
story about a Peterborough woman who was put on house arrest, which is kind of interesting because it is also about the Indigenous Peoples Court, the IPC in Peterborough. I thought maybe it would be a good time to revisit that. And lastly, the Peterborough Regional Farmers Market location at the Quaker Foods City Square began today, which is May
Oh, that's
3rd at
right.
our the day we are recording this. It's happening right now, and that's probably why our viewership is low today, because everyone's just out there getting their fresh
Everyone's at the farmers market.
veg.
Good for
Yeah,
them.
I'm kind of jealous. Like
Checking
we
out the
might have to
new
reschedule.
Yeah, checking out
Um,
the new location for it, right?
yeah, I'm
Yeah,
really excited about that as well.
it should be really nice, you know?
You know what? Why don't we talk about that first? It's kind of just like a feel good story, maybe.
Yeah, yeah, I like that. I think that's a good idea.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, no, I'll admit I haven't been to the farmers market too often. The most I've ever went was like over the winter time when it was in the Peterborough Square mall there. But yeah, I think it's a great little spot. I mean, say what you will about vast swaths of concrete in downtown urban settings, but you know, I enjoyed the ice rink too, so it'll be a good spot. It's down there in the Quaker Foods City Square in downtown Peterborough.
Yeah. Now, the if the location makes you think that it's near the Quaker factory, which originally that's what I thought.
Oh yeah,
It's not. It's on Charlotte Street,
yeah.
between Charlotte and King, just east of Aylmer Street, and I think, you know what? Like, it's a urban park. Not really my favorite aesthetic, but it is what it is, and I guess I'm glad that it exists. I kind of enjoyed the skating rink. I've never skated there, But it's kind of nice to see people getting some outdoor activity in downtown Peterborough. And now that it's going to house the Peterborough Regional Farmers Market, then I think that's a pretty good use of the space.
Yeah.
They've long been searching for a permanent location for an outdoor space, I think. And previously, I know it was at the Charlotte Towers,
Yes. Yeah.
which I felt was like a little mid. I feel like this is just it's just across the street from that, and it's a much nicer location.
Yeah, it's good to see this being utilized. It's I still feel like there's a lot of concrete there, but maybe that'll change. Who knows?
I wonder what the logic is because I definitely feel like they could use a giant tree in the middle of that space. I do
Yeah.
wonder if it's like then there's leaves and you have to sweep it up, or like why is it designed like this? Like it's just like a concrete slab with a skating rink. What does the skating rink even become in the summer months?
I guess we're gonna have to wait and see, right? Because if I'm not mistaken, I think this is like the first summer that it's really been open.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I wonder if they'll do like roller derby stuff there or something. Like, can you still roller skate around there? Maybe that would be fun.
I mean, that would be kind of cool. I know in 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 my hometown of Burlington, we have something very similar, although it's also not similar because it's also like outside of a building on like the lakefront. But it turns into a pond in the
Okay.
like it's an actual like pond, and people like it's like a wading pool almost, and people like ride their little um remote control boats around and stuff like that, and it's a nice little spot. But that's
All right.
like a very similar sort of idea. um but I don't think that's the case here, so it'll be interesting because it's a big skating rink too.
Yeah.
It's a
Maybe
large
it
swath
can
of
just be
land.
like I know there's always like some hula hoopers at the farmers market, so maybe it can just be like an activity space or something while the farmers market's going on. Anyways, I'm going to try to go on
Yeah,
Saturday, right?
yeah,
So, if you're out there and you want to hang out with me, maybe I'll see you at the Peterborough Regional Farmers Market, which is
yeah,
operating Wednesdays and Saturdays at the Quaker Foods City Square. Now, in other news, we really should get into the drama here.
yeah.
Stephen Wright, who ran for mayor in the previous Peterborough municipal election, missed the deadline to file his financial statements to City Hall, which makes him ineligible to run in 2026. So, sadly, I think that means he's ineligible to run for any office in 2026, not just the mayor.
I would assume so. Yeah, yeah. So
And
I
yeah,
think he might be done, which he doesn't sound too upset about.
yeah, it
Sounds like
almost
he's
seemed
focusing
like a
on family.
retirement announcement. It was like, yeah, I'm done and I'm not coming back.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah. He tried, and he served a term, and you know
yeah, in a
there's
way,
more important
disappointed that
things.
he was not able to just be a counselor again. Not that he was necessarily the most aligned with my personal views, but I thought, maybe doing a little better than some of the current people on the Peterborough Council. And what I guess concerns me about this Examiner article is that the headline here is that Wright is ineligible to run in 2026. But if you read all the way at the bottom of the article, there's some interesting notes about the financial campaigns for some other people who ran for mayor, specifically Henry Clark and Mayor Jeff Leal. We found out that Jeff Leal's total campaign expenses were $43,800, give or take, and Henry Clark's campaign expenses were $41,300, give or take. So, as we well know, Sebastian or I is probably going to run for mayor one day,
Yes.
and it's going to probably cost us 40 something thousand dollars. That's the kind of money you need in order to run for mayor and give it an honest shot in Peterborough, Ontario. So I guess that is good to know, right? Like,
Yeah, it's an interesting figure. I did some digging to try and find where some of these documents were, and I might do some do some more digging after this. But I'd really like to see like a full list of who donated. But yeah,
Yeah.
it's more money than I make
Yeah, of
in a
course. I mean,
year.
a lot of this money is coming from donations, right? And that
Yeah,
is the point. Like, that's the
yeah,
money you need to raise in order to run for mayor, which also means that you need to probably have some rich people who support you on your mission. And that is the nature of these kind of campaigns. Now, it was revealed, and of course, this is like just coming out, so we're going to have to do some more digging, but it was revealed that Jeff Leal, our current mayor here, received a $1,000 donation to his campaign from developer Paul Dietrich of Peterborough.
hmm
Um, Now, I guess a lot of people in Peterborough have a stigma against people suffering from addiction. I personally have a stigma for people who identify as developers. I don't really know what this means. I don't know who Paul Dietrich is or what buildings he's associated with, but a bit of a concern there. There was also a $1,200 from Simon Zhang of Toronto. Zhang's proposed 6-story apartment building recently received a rezoning approval from council to replace the former Vinnie's secondhand store on George Street North. So, some questions there. Some questions there. Leal receiving this money, and as we know, he's kind of been in favor of these new developments. I'm not sure if there's any direct conflicts of interest beyond this that are evident at this moment, but it's definitely a thread that I think now people are aware of. It might be a thread that gets pulled.
yeah, yeah. I feel like within the confines of like the election, um, it's not. It strikes me as that's the appropriate time for developers to be giving politicians money if they're ever going to give politicians money, and it's part of the reason why we have like this fairly transparent reporting, right? So that we can actually see who's sort of buttering up the politicians a little bit. I mean, it's like a give and take sort of mentality. However, if Stephen Zhang was like giving Jeff Leal $1,200 before a Monday night general committee meeting, that would be a much different story, right? If that, but you know,
Yeah.
he's definitely this is just politics, baby. This is how it is. This is, and I think that the $1,200 is the maximum allowable to grant to a politician in an election in Peterborough. But yeah, I mean, it's certainly something that people should be aware of. I think that it's a very important thing that um, people should pay attention to. Just where, because obviously it's going to have like some influence in terms of how people will act and vote, perhaps, right? But it's about like garnering like some form of good faith, quote unquote, with
Right.
politicians. But yeah, but now we know. Now we know.
Yeah, now we know. And it should be also noted that Henry Clark also received $1,200 from Dietrich and $1,200 from Zhang. So they were, I guess that's where they were placing their bets. That's where the developers had their money, quite literally,
Yeah.
on Jeff Leal and Henry Clark. So they were successful, I suppose, in having one of their horses in the race win. I guess we don't know if they also donated to Stephen Wright's campaign. There is a good chance that they did.
It's true.
Maybe they were
There's a
hedging
very good
all of
chance
their
that they did.
bets.
Yeah,
And
it would be interesting. I mean, that's sort of like from my point of view, like what this story kind of tells us is like the importance of filing your financial statements. And it does say in the article that Stephen Wright still does intend to file them. It's just, he claims that there was a campaign worker who's been away since October and is now since returned. So these financial statements will be forthcoming, and so there's obviously more to this, but it just speaks to the importance of transparency and like filing your financial statements, and so that the
yeah,
public knows, like because it's a much different story for people to be aware of this as opposed to not being able to access this information, right? And
yeah,
there's a very high likelihood that they did. It would strike me as very strange if they only gave to Clark and Leal.
Why is
But
that, Sebastian?
well, because I feel like uh, Stephen Wright was very much like a he felt like an establishment sort of candidate. I mean, I don't know if
Hmm.
I was just like the feeling on the ground and stuff, and amongst specifically, this is going way back to when I was actually covering the campaign, but you know, being in and around all of the candidates um for for mayor and then council, Stephen Wright had like this groundswell of like incoming potential um council like counselor candidates. It seemed like he could kind of command that aspect of it.
Okay.
Whereas it was kind of like Leal and Clark were kind of like chilling in a corner. And you know, Victor Cruz was just doing his own thing. He was in his own little world. I loved he was something to behold. Like what would be very surprising is if they gave money to Victor Cruz or I'm even blanking on his name. Um, I can't believe I'm blanking on his name because I think that's like one of the most read articles I've ever written is the profile on the on him. But yeah, I would be very surprised if they didn't.
Was it the guy who was like getting yelled at? Lumsden.
Yes, Brian Lumsden. Oh my God, yes. How could I forget Brian Lumsden? Yeah,
I'm just reading chat, so you know. Like
Brian Lumsden. There you go.
I
See, I need to
am
have the chat open too. Yeah,
yeah, I am an omniscient being, but only when I'm able to read chat.
yeah. Chat's where you gain all your power, and I understand that. Um,
It's true. It's true.
yeah. Yeah, Brian Lumsden.
Um
I would be shocked if he gave money to if either of these developers give money to Victor Cruz or Brian Lumsden.
yeah,
Um,
it certainly seemed like I'm not remembering the results right now, but it certainly seemed as though like Wright and Leo were the front runners of the campaign. So the fact that Henry Clark got money, I would be surprised if Stephen Wright didn't.
yeah.
Um and yeah, I guess what would also be interesting because we know just about everyone voted in favor of that new development from Simon Zhang's company that is happening on George Street where the former Vinny's used to be.
Hmm.
Pretty much everyone. I think there was only one vote against it. Is that right? Do you
Yeah,
remember?
I believe that would have been Keith Riel, because he's concerned about the lack of parking, and specifically the ways in which council has kind of passed bylaws to amend the zoning plan to reduce the required numbers of parking spots, um, because people have cars. I think
Right.
is the quote,
Yes.
which is true. Some
Yeah.
people have cars, not everyone has cars. Um,
I heard. Oh, I heard people who pay taxes have cars, and no, and if you
mm,
don't have a car, then you don't pay taxes. That's what Keith Riel
right,
told me.
right. He told you that on the down low. He's
Yeah, yeah.
just so you
He's
know.
got me on speed dial.
Yeah, I'm just working out this equation, Danny, and this is what I'm thinking. I've cracked the
That's
code.
right.
Oh
That's
no.
right. So I mean, the fact that everyone kind of voted in favor of the six-story apartment building from Toronto's Simon Zhang,
Mhm.
it doesn't quite stand out as a conflict. Like if it was only
No,
Leal who voted in favor and everyone else was against it, then it would be like, wow, red flag, right?
that
But
would be
since it was
suspicious.
almost unanimous and the one person who did hold out was worried about car infrastructure, which we already have too much of, um this doesn't strike me as anything to be concerned about. It's not the scandal that our podcast needs in order to get the clicks and views, but
I'm
it
still
is
holding out for a scandal, you know. I'm
yeah, any day.
yeah. I'm jealous of like Robin Doolittle who broke the Rob Ford crack smoking video, you know.
Right. I know. When is Dave Smith gonna smoke crack?
We'll see. But yeah, no. I mean, it would be a much different story if this wasn't coming out of documents published by the city, you know, because you know,
Yes.
if I was getting a phone call or like an anonymous text message with documents showing like a transaction history and extended text conversation between Simon Zhang and Jeff Leal, um, that would be wild.
That would be
But
wild, but in all
that,
likelihood,
that would put Arthur on the map.
Yeah, that's right. That's
No,
right. But I think if we just keep going down this road, this scandal will probably happen. If I
it'll
had to
eventually
like
come.
put my bets on it, it would probably involve like Michelle Ferreri.
Yeah,
Like that's our best chance of getting a scandal. It's like, Michelle, please
yeah,
do something. Do something silly.
yeah. I think overarchingly, like the main like lesson to take away from this is like we should be thankful to like live in a society that is fairly transparent, like transparent to the extent that a story like this can be written and it's not like surprising, or it's it's like it's just the information is there. um
Yeah.
and I think it's good that we continue doing this, because hopefully people will listen to this and then realize like, oh, you know these things are not being hidden, right? Like it kind of dismantles a lack of trust in the institutions to a certain degree. That's not to say we shouldn't be skeptical of these kinds of things, because obviously there's still things that are occurring that might not be as savory. But I just like, I think in this instance it's a pretty good reminder that we have a fairly transparent system here,
The
at least at the
system
municipal
works.
level. It works if you work it.
It's like, yeah, the system, which is very broken,
Yeah,
works.
working
But
right now. Yeah,
yeah.
it's
Um,
imperfect, but you know.
right. Should we move on to the story with Dave Smith here, since I just name dropped him in a very funny way? Sounds like he's not going to be smoking crack because he doesn't live downtown.
Right.
And that's where all the crack smokers exist, according to our some conservatives in our community. Ontario, however, is providing over $1.1 million for 12 addiction treatment beds. And the city of Peterborough and Peterborough County are also each contributing $100,000 to the program, which means we are getting a 12-bed residential detox and addiction program in the Peterborough area. Now, there was
Mhm.
some reporting from Czechs News, Global News, saying that it was not just in the Peterborough area, but it was in the downtown core. And Dave Smith came out hot on Twitter saying to correct Sam Hoopt, who is the videographer who I believe made the video,
Mhm.
and Czechs News Watch, it will not be in the downtown core, which you must ask yourself why. Specifically, it's going to be somewhere in the Peterborough area. A lot of the people who are unhoused, a lot of people who are suffering from addiction to opioids or other drugs exist downtown. I just wonder why this detox and addiction program is not something that could be run downtown.
Yeah,
The
I'm reading
only
back.
answer that I come up with is stigma, is that they don't want to view these people. They don't want to acknowledge that people exist. They don't want tourists who come to Peterborough over the summer months to be like, oh, well, there's someone seeking treatment at the methadone clinic. They just don't want to see it. And I don't really understand any other reason not to put it downtown.
Yeah, I mean, this there's so many conversations that arise out of this, just in terms of the sheer fact that most of the services, the pre-existing services, are already existing within the downtown, so it would make sense for people to receive treatment in the downtown. um uh, the two, like, forecast and uh the Canadian Mental Health Association, is like literally on like one block downtown.
Yeah.
And the two partner organizations who are coming together to aid in this. So sort of would make sense that that would be where it is. However, I recall even back at when this was initially brought forward to council by Smith, and the city approved the $100,000 to be allocated over each year for the next 2 years. they were still back then rather cagey about the location. And this kind of ties into some of the hot gossip that um, interestingly came up at council
Right.
this past week, right? Wherein Leslie Parnell was very concerned about the rezoning plan for a bank on Park Street, I believe, um, because they wanted to add the word clinic to it to allow for future use. And everyone in Autonomy and Monaghan Ward all voted against that. So that was an interesting little kind of tie into, well, what kind of spaces can we utilize in order to help people? What spaces are we going to allocate or allow to be allocated? It should be said, like, there's no, I believe an accounting firm is looking to move into the what is an abandoned bank on Park Street. So this is, there's no like imminent danger of, again, phrasing it as if I actually believe that it would be a danger to have a clinic in a neighborhood. Um, because I don't think it is, but yeah, it'll be interesting. I mean, it should be said too, like, this is a partnership too between the county, Peterborough County, and the city of Peterborough. So um it would still strike me as logical to have it within a downtown setting, unless there is somewhere um that would make more sense, which is easily accessible between um other resources. But I can't see that being the case.
Yeah. I mean, are we really scared by rezoning something as a clinic in the downtown core? We're like, no, we can't have a clinic because it could be any type of clinic. It could be a methadone clinic. It could be a treatment clinic for people suffering from addiction. Therefore, we can't have any clinics. No
Yeah,
clinics.
no
And it's
clinics
like, what? Really? It's like
except
we
a
can't
veterinary
have.
clinic.
Okay, yeah. We can't have. Yeah, it's like, are we never going to have a walk in clinic downtown just because we're scared it might be a methadone clinic? It's like, it's just like such an irrational fear. It kind of, to me, demonstrates how the stigma against unhoused people suffering from addiction, that stigma is a negative thing that actually affects us all. It's
Mhm.
like, we can't have healthcare downtown just in case unhoused people try to access it. Really? And they say, oh, we don't want to see unhoused people downtown. We want them to not be there, but we also don't want them to recover from their addiction by
Mhm.
offering them life-saving services. It's like, so wait, you don't want these people to exist downtown, but you don't want to help them get treatment and access that treatment. What is the other option for them not existing downtown? I ask thee, right? And it's like, well, the other option is death because we know 70 people died last year. We know even Dave Smith can acknowledge that there's more than one death a week. Or,
Yeah.
sorry, is it one death a week? Yeah. Well, is it just about,
Yeah, it's a death every 6 days, I
right?
think,
Yeah.
is what it
So,
equates to. Yeah.
so it's like, why? Well, why don't you just put the location where it's gonna be of the most benefit to the people who need the help? And really, all the only thing is, it's just stigma. They don't want to see poor people accessing healthcare in Ontario, in Peterborough.
Hmm.
But the funny thing to me is they want people to go downtown. And you know what? Who would go downtown if they had a clinic? The people who work at the clinic, who are like doctors and nurses. And it's like, you're forgetting about the other side of the economy that, like, would also be beneficial to downtown Peterborough as well. And it's like that stigma is just like holding us back as a community. So
Exactly. Like, there's so much tied to this idea that somehow people who are living with addiction are somehow dangerous or pose a threat to the quote unquote normal people within society. It's like it goes so deep. And like the fact of the matter is, like, it's a self-fulfilling cycle, because if you're not fulfilling the needs for the most vulnerable members of your community, then that's creating unsafe spaces for them, which in turn is going to create unsafe spaces for for others, right? For people who are privileged enough not to live with addictions or experiencing homelessness or any number of different things, right? And if people aren't able to see the ways in which they can like coexist in a meaningful way, then
Yeah,
that's just it's kind of a broken community in a lot of senses, right? Like
I know.
it's just sad. It's really, really sad because yeah, I mean, people need understanding and compassion, and there's just none of that, it seems, at most corners, you know.
Yeah,
There's
and
like
I
glimmers of hope, but not what we'd
for
want to
sure.
see, maybe.
And really, my question is like, does Dave Smith even get to decide? Is this 1 million of funding for 12 addiction treatment beds? Is it conditional on the fact that it's not in the downtown core or not?
I'm
And if so, like that, well, like what are you even doing? Like what is this 1.1 million? We don't even get to decide how it gets spent in Peterborough. It's up to Dave Smith comes in and starts just like swinging his big conservative power around, and it's just like I really don't care what Dave Smith says on Twitter. As much as he's never on Twitter and never answers anyone's questions, he says this, and it's like,
yeah.
well, I don't even know why Global edited and made a correction saying at the beginning of this article now, an original version of the story stated the program would be in downtown Peterborough. However, MPP Dave Smith says, and then what
Mhm.
they don't say is like said on Twitter, it will
Yeah.
not be situated in the downtown core. The article
Twitter.
has been updated. See, like
Yeah.
I would be like, well, do the journalism here on Global side. Does Dave Smith even get to decide? Does council have a say? Does the community have a say? Do the people who are experts in this field have a say? Or
Yeah.
is Dave Smith's word on Twitter like, oh, well, that must be true? Like I don't know. I'm just like
Ex- it-
skeptical of it. I would,
no, exactly,
yeah,
like that's exactly where my mind went as well. It's like, because I mean, I haven't written about this, but the announcement for homelessness prevention in Peterborough, like the announcement that came forward during that, like Dave Smith was all about like, oh no, this is the city gets to decide, you know, everything has to be done with the city as long as it has to do with homelessness prevention. That was his big MO. But like he draws the line on here as if
right,
and it's unclear, and it's been unclear since it was first brought to council, where this might be, um
yeah,
where the
yeah,
plans for this are kind of going. And it's something to look deeper into. But my sense here is that Dave Smith does not have like a unilateral say in this. And I don't think um global, like this isn't a very helpful editor's note in a lot of senses, because it doesn't actually answer the questions. And I don't know if they followed up with Dave Smith, or like or if Dave Smith actually reached out, or someone from his office reached out, not via Twitter, and then he also reached out in a public way so that the public could see that he'd done his footwork in this respect, right? But he's
yeah.
yeah, I don't get it. I mean, it's it's a shame, because I mean, it's an important thing to be talking about. Like the addition of treatment beds, even over a 2-year pilot program, is significant. Um,
Yeah.
like treatment and I should say detox beds as well, for a total of 12. But
Right.
it's
Well, I'm sure the people suffering from addiction can just drive to wherever the methadone clinic ends up being, right?
oh yeah, for sure. Just hop in a taxi and you're good to go.
No, just
I mean,
drive their own vehicles that they own and that the city commits like so much public resources
yeah.
towards maintaining the infrastructure of, or just take our very reliable city transit that runs so frequently that like even if you miss it, it'll just be like a 50-second wait
It's a
for the
it's a
next one.
it's a bit of an assumption. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, like that. I mean, I'm just
It's
picturing someone
frustrating. It's
driving.
frustrating.
I'm just picturing someone driving to a rehab clinic and just like valet parking for like 35 days and then driving home.
Yeah.
I'm sure
Well,
it
I'm sure
happens. Like, don't get me wrong.
Dave
I'm not
Smith
going to
will
say it
be the
doesn't happen.
valet.
I mean, addiction doesn't discriminate, right? Like there are people who would be able to drive their, you
I
know,
know, but the point is, I'm not trying to be have my own stigma here. I'm just trying to like meet people where they're at. And I think that's what the government has to do as well.
Mm.
You know, like,
Yeah.
yeah, of
Yeah,
course, you could
exactly.
also own a
Exactly.
car, but
Yeah.
it's like, let's just put this in the place where it's going to be accessed in the most accessible way to the people who need to access the treatment.
Yeah.
And that my concern too, if city council is this scared to zone something as a potential clinic downtown,
Yeah.
then are we never gonna get a walk-in clinic? Are we like we're literally just shooting ourselves in the foot, and it's hella frustrating. So I do hope that Dave Smith loses on these grounds, and I hope that the clinic can be put downtown where it belongs, and I hope that he's not able to just have pure control over this $1.1 million and how it's spent. As you said, yeah, he said that he doesn't have control over it. So, but now he's saying it's not going to be in the downtown core. And yeah,
Yeah.
it's just his opinion, I think. And Global News is reporting on it as if like, oh, it's the law.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah,
so
exactly. And I mean, there's multiple different things like coming here. So I just find it interesting how like the one thing on homelessness prevention is being framed as a means of like the province is going to be hands off, but somehow now a single tweet is being reported on with the same weight as like an announcement, um, with no real backing or confirmation. Like it doesn't say here that this has been confirmed by council as well or anything like that. So it strikes me as kind of odd.
right.
I as an editor, I might not have made the exact same note. I would have still noted that he said that, right? I think it's still important to note the fact that he did say that, but it's,
Yeah,
you know, don't frame it as if it's like the be all end all of
I know. And I find that that's a problem I have all the time with reporting, like especially coming out of Peterborough, especially because there's not much journalism to begin with or enough outlets to begin with, is that like, oh, the chief of police said this, and they print it as if it's like verbatim, as if it is the only thing that can possibly happen in these scenarios. And
yeah.
it's like it's the same here with Dave Smith. It's like they basically, oh, Dave Smith made a tweet, they immediately kowtowed to him, and they could have just, what I would have done is like update at the end of the article just saying like, and here's Dave Smith's tweet embedded in the article saying that he opposes this. It's like
Mhm.
it's I don't know. I don't know what the fear is as well. It feels like, oh no, Dave Smith tweeted and said we might have got something wrong. We have to capitulate to him immediately. Like, but like he doesn't have that power over Global
No.
News. Although I find that they do, like, they Global in general has been like leaning conservative in a lot of ways. In the wake of like Pierre Poilievre attacking the CBC and trying to defund them, I find that Global News has done a bit more pandering to the conservatives, especially in Ontario, at
Mhm.
least as far as I can tell, leaning towards the Ford government a bit, and I don't know, something to be concerned about. Also surprising that they didn't want it downtown because that's where they're installing all the new closed circuit cameras, the CCTV, at behest of police. So you think, hey, aren't these the people that you're specifically surveilling, and making sure that businesses are being protected? Um,
Mhm.
so this is another thing that's concerning to me. A dozen new CCTV cameras in the downtown core. They are basically at all the intersections between George and Elmer, Sherbrooke and Brock. So within those like four intersections there, there's going to be 12 intersections that have cameras.
Yeah, well, I mean, you make a good point, right? Like people we want to surveil are the people who are going to be accessing addiction treatment services, right? Those are the types of seedy underbelly characters who need to be uh surveilled and policed.
Right.
Yeah. So
So
it would just make sense. I mean, you wouldn't want such ruffians running around unsurveilled like just outside of town,
yeah,
right? Like these are
right.
these are the real bane of our society, right? Yeah.
That seems to be kind of like the sentiment amongst some of the city councilors, and I it's odd to me because like so many of them are looking at their best interests, and you would think that they would want it downtown because they don't live downtown. Like where are we gonna put it, in the South End next to Leslie Parnell's house?
Yeah,
I
there's that
highly
too.
doubt it.
Yeah.
It's like, so where do they want it? Right? It's just like, do you want it to be near the hospital? That is the only other place that would potentially make sense, is
Mhm.
like in the medical district. But then at the same time, how are you going to get people to and from there if you're not investing in transit? Like I said last week, good thing I caught the bus from the hospital, because I would have had to wait an hour had I missed it.
Yeah, no, exactly. I d- I'm just noticing this too. So there's the editor's note on on the global news piece saying that
Okay.
this article has been updated. It says it will not be. Dave Smith says that it will not be in the downtown core, and then the caption underneath the video says, "Six detox and six residential treatment beds will operate in the downtown core as part of the city and county's ongoing fight against the opioid crisis." If you up
Yes.
rule, very very rudimentary rule uh of editing, update your captions when you update the story if they're related. Anyways, I don't work at
Right.
Global,
Yeah. Yeah.
and
I
I
know.
make pitfalls as well when I'm doing things, but I just found that very funny because
Yeah. And I mean, who knows who this is, obviously like the editor's doing. Obviously there's probably people doing great work over at Global, like the person who made the video and all of that. There's many people that every story goes into, especially when you're working with videos. So it's not
oh
like it's
yeah,
everyone's fault there, but
no,
um, you know,
no, just
just don't capitulate to
exactly,
people when
yeah,
they say, "Hey, you made a mistake." Just actually make sure that you made that mistake.
yeah, and then frame it away in a way which isn't um kind of spreading what isn't exactly accurate information if it's not actually confirmed that it will not be in the downtown. It just says that
Right.
Dave Smith
Yeah.
says it will not be situated in the downtown unless this article said that
Yeah.
it will be. Anyways, crazy.
Yeah. Anyways, onto the cameras. They will cost $8,640 annually to operate the data. Now, the chief of police, Stu Betts, is insisting that they're just to deter crime. They're not about surveilling people in real time, because that would be a slippery slope. So I guess the idea is that once a crime has been committed, they could then refer to the cameras, and it's like, okay. Um I don't know. It's personally not something that I support, and I think I always have worries about who is able to access this. Are they being used in the right way? You never know. It just takes one bad actor, one bad apple, even, to spoil the bunch, and use this surveillance in a way that is not justified. The cameras were purchased using a grant of $185,505 from the Ontario CCTV Grant Program. So, one way or another, though, this is taxpayer dollars, whether you're paying those taxes to Ontario or to the municipality. It's like, to me, it's like, okay, $185,000 just for cameras, just for 12 cameras. Really? Feel like that's money you could have put into getting those 12 beds in the downtown core to help people get off addiction or whatever, or $100,000 to keep the shelter open, overnight shelter open. It's like, really,
Yeah,
we just got almost $200,000 for cameras, and the other almost $9,000 a year to keep them operational and store the data and whatnot. So I don't know. Another thing, like, it's like conservatives will always be the ones to be like, oh, China's a police state, yada, yada, yada. They're always surveilling each other. But then they'll also be the ones to be like, and we need cameras in downtown. It's like, okay, well, which way do you want it? You want to like police poor people, but you also don't want to be an authoritarian country. And it's like, you can't have it both ways, but okay. The
yeah,
police department also found $10,000 to buy two new devices that collect data on speeding. These are called Armadillo trackers, and the devices cost just under $5,000 each. Another kind of weird thing here is that Jeff Leal asked Chief Betts how many trackers police could use ideally. And Betts said that 2 would be helpful. My understanding when I read this is like, okay, good thing they already got 2 out of their own money. And then Jeff Leal comes along and says, okay, well, maybe we'll buy you 2 more, because these will help curb speeding in residential neighborhoods. And to me, if you take a look at these armadillo trackers, like there's nothing about them that would actually necessarily deter speeding. They're just trackers, as the name suggests. They collect data, and they don't like automatically issue tickets or anything. It's just collecting data. And there's nothing about this that would deter people from driving any which way. So I don't know if that's $10,000 that the city wants to spend, even though the police have spent their own $10,000. And it concerns me again about Jeff Leal's kind of instincts when it comes to stuff like this, because he basically said, hey, we'll give you $10,000 if you want. And I would just, I don't know. I don't know why he would be so forthcoming about that.
Yeah, this is a weird one. I mean, the notion, oh God. It just drives me crazy because, like you said, this is close to $200,000 for CCTV in the Peterborough area. The city couldn't find fit to allocate funds, and I know that in this instance, I imagine like this is exclusively for the CCTV, but just as like at the municipal level and the provincial level, like where our priorities rest is in surveillance and as a means of deterring certain behaviors, which, when actually addressed at the root cause, would, well, first of all, don't actually generally pose a threat to society, like except in terms of like the individual hurting themselves in a lot of senses and causing, you know, you know, more and more issues outside of themselves as a result of the larger systems. But like it, it's just, I don't know, it's just staggering. So all this is going to do is create a loop wherein police resources are likely going to be drawn away, as they already have been in this instance, to further surveil people, and specific people, um, who the police already have an interest in over policing, and already do over police. These aren't being set up at right in front of Leslie Parnell's house. As it's not being set up in like a suburb. you
Yeah.
know it's these are very specific intersections, where there's a lot of activity, shall we say.
I know. And I do wonder, like, would they be able to see into people's windows? Would they be able to witness things that, nobody has no business watching? Gary Baldwin actually raised the idea that they could be vandalized, costing taxpayers even more money. But of course, Chief Betts here said, "Oh, don't worry, we'll put them up high. We'll put them out of harm's way as much as possible." And I mean, it's just interesting. It's like, oh, we'll put them out of harm's way. It's like, okay, well, why don't we put people out of harm's way by making sure that they're not filmed
Yeah,
24/7 when they're like
yeah,
in their downtown apartment, or just like doing things that the police have no business observing,
yeah.
like, um
This brings me back to something that came up during budget discussions, and specifically when the police had to come and redo their budget. They presented it twice as a result of um, Chief Betts having just taken on the job the day that the budget was initially, like the police services budget was initially uh, put forward. Um, there was a lot of discussion around a certain program that would allow the police access to people's like doorbell cameras. I don't know if you've ever heard of this program, but or if
oh
anyone in
my
the
god,
chat has.
really?
Yeah. And it's the same kind of rhetoric surrounding, oh, well, we're not going to be monitoring it all the time. It's only when we need to, then we'll ask to access it,
Yeah.
which I just don't like as like a matter of principle. I don't like the police having access to this,
Right.
like I don't
And what
I
what
don't trust them.
yeah, exactly. And it's like they're not trustworthy. And
No.
why do they get to use their decision making skills, which I don't trust, as to decide when they can access this footage or not, right? Like if let's say, was a young university student who sold weed outside of his apartment. This is obviously a hypothetical scenario. And the police wanted to use that camera footage all of a sudden to monitor my house selling this substance, which has now become legal, right? And it is widely considered as not an immoral thing. Why? What would stop them from using this footage to monitor my situation? So my point is that we now have a safe supply for cannabis, and we should have a safe supply for other drugs. But instead of giving that safe supply, we simply monitor people and police them and make sure that the help that they need is going to be out of reach. And all of these things, it's like we're doing everything except like addressing the issue, and it's like,
Yeah.
it's so frustrating, and I don't trust their judgment. It's going to be used to police people in ways that are unjust. Maybe they'll solve like one actual crime a year
Yeah.
doing this, but will it have been worth it? And as someone in chat is pointing out, is crime even increasing significantly? Not that we know of.
The police would
I don't
say
think
it
there's.
is.
Of course, the police would say it is, because every time they fearmonger about that, they get a bump in their funding, and they spend it on useless stuff that doesn't actually address the root
Yeah.
problem. They spend
Well,
it on cameras.
I imagine they'll stop doing that when it stops working, right? Like they keep they keep coming to council and telling the same story, and
Yeah.
and it works every
Right. I
year. I
know
mean,
it
there was no
works.
discussion on the police budget. I remember sitting at the painstaking budget talks, and they just skipped over it completely. It was just accepted. Like there was
Yeah.
nothing, and
I
it was
know.
not without controversy. You know,
Yeah. So, as someone else input in chat is pointing out, people have ladders. If they want to go vandalize these cameras, they can. And I mean, not only do we have ladders, but there's like, you could get a slingshot, you could throw rocks, you could throw a great number of things. I'm sure you could get up on a ladder and spray paint it. You could do a lot of things, none of which I'm specifically encouraging because that might be illegal. But I'm just saying there are ways to, I suppose, save $9,000 a year annually if these cameras were to simply not exist.
what? Is...
because they would no longer be operational, right?
Imagine that.
Yeah.
I wonder how. I do wonder how certain counselors would feel if we just, you and I, Danny, we just set up a camera in front of their house, and we told them, "Don't worry, we're not actively monitoring it, but when we
Right.
want to, we can. When something happens, we'll do it."
Yeah.
Like,
Nobody feels comfortable with that. It's such an
no,
absurd notion.
like, oh, don't worry, it's just the sidewalk in front of your house,
That is
so we
public space.
so we can only see when you're coming and going. Don't worry, it's
Yeah.
fine. It's fine. Like I walk everywhere downtown. People are going to be able to track me,
Yeah. And
track my
also
comings and goings, and
yeah.
I don't
And
do
also we're going
anything.
to store the data for probably indefinitely. Right, so that
Well, yeah, I
anybody
mean,
could
it's not.
access it in the future. If the next chief of police goes back on this idea that, oh, we're only going to watch it when we need to,
Yeah,
then that data will still exist. They could watch it. They could go back for years and years of people just living their lives downtown. So
yeah. I mean,
absolutely hate this.
by all means, track my comings and goings to like Freshco, and
Yeah,
and the only like that's the only
I know, right?
the only
Well,
two places I go.
criminal activity could exist there. There could be people trying to
It's true.
secure food for themselves without properly paying the Weston family or whatever, Sobeys. I forget who that oligarch is. But, yeah, it's really frustrating. And I don't know. It again, it's another example of how our priorities are all wrong. However, I feel like there is an example of how there is an alternative to this, because there was a story here and people are touting it as a success story for the court. Now, it isn't the court in Peterborough. It is the Indigenous Peoples Court, which is an alternative to the court in Peterborough. Peterborough woman was served house arrest after hitting teens with a vehicle. So this, I think, is an example of restorative justice. A Peterborough woman has been put on house arrest, and they pleaded guilty to dangerous operation causing bodily harm. They were sentenced to a 6-month conditional sentence and 18 months probation in the Ontario Court of Justice in Peterborough. And yeah, this is kind of an example of like, hey, we don't need the prison system. We don't uh,
Hmm.
need the court even. And there's even a special court for Indigenous peoples to access because their system of justice is going to look different, and all they're of course dealing with different intersections of how they respond to the law and how they respond to colonial institutions. So I was kind of like
Hmm.
stoked to see this, for like lack of a better term. Now, good. You should know also that nobody was like killed as part of this incident with the car, with the vehicle. So she didn't seriously injure or kill the teens, thank goodness. And now they are kind of like on a path to deal with their trauma and whatever other potential issues that they have going on. And I think this is kind of an example of how the law, the systems could work to try to rehabilitate people instead of simply surveilling them, leaving them in the vicious cycle of the systems that we have in place.
Yeah, no, I mean, absolutely. I mean, it's this kind of ties back right back into the notion of like over policing certain communities, right? And of course, Indigenous people are like a part of the are a part of that, right? And you know, historically and in our present, and you know, this kind of recognition of the fact that jail time is not going to fix any issues, and in fact, it's likely going to reinscribe traumas, which are already pre-existing in people's lives. You know, it's not going to aid in the, like you said, the rehabilitation or help the individual um come to sort of work through part of the things that may have been contributing to the reasons they acted in certain ways at a certain point in their life, right? The idea of like locking people up is not going to, you know, help anyone. You know, it's not going to help society. It's not going to help you know, in instances such as this where someone was clearly, you know, acting in a way which is being informed by previous traumas, that's not going to aid them in any respect, and it's not going to help create a healthy society where we, you know, learn to live alongside and you know, understand people and their experiences, you know.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And really, I mean, at the end of the day, that is also what people who are like contributing to the stigma of people of different intersectionalities. Like, we want everyone to be rehabilitated, right? Like, we don't want to push them further and further away. We want them to be rehabilitated and come back to being big contributors, like, to society again, right? Like, and I it's hard for me to understand why more city councilors are not on board with this notion, why Dave Smith is not on board with this notion as well, because it seems like the goal, they have the same goal, is to keep these things kind of like out of sight, out of mind. And I mean, the best way to do that is to help people be rehabilitated, right? But they want to just like push away and potentially exterminate, it feels like.
Yeah, I mean, that's not not an inaccurate way of framing it, right? You know, like they'd
Yeah.
prefer to just have the issue sort of take care of itself to a certain degree. The only unfortunate thing that, I mean, there's a market reason to not do that because it's very expensive to deal with the ramifications of untreated addictions, trauma, and mental mental illness. Like it's very, very expensive to do that. It would be cheaper just to provide resources to people, you know? It would be
Yeah.
cheaper to not have people end up in institutions, like punitive institutions, you know, if you're addressing the needs of them prior to them ending up in a situation where they are completely without options and are having to resort to criminal activity um, due to the situation, like you mentioned earlier, like not paying Galen Weston's, $1 billion salary or what have you, right? Like,
Yeah.
people generally don't steal out of a a deep-seated desire to, like, people do that for a reason that isn't you know and it how I think you know what I'm trying to say. I'm having difficulties kind of putting it forward. Like, that's a last resort, right? Like, resorting
Yeah.
to any sort of most criminal behavior explicitly undertaken in the settings that we're talking about, um, that are going to be surveilled, are not being undertaken by people who have a lot of options. Like, it's not
Right.
something people are super stoked to do, right? Like, um,
Yeah.
living without shelter is extraordinarily stressful, traumatizing, exposure to violence, of all different kinds, right? Um, yeah. So just don't allow for the system to force people into these situations, and then you wouldn't have to be spending millions and millions of dollars to
Right.
build something downtown. Like, it's a vicious cycle. I always want to try and
Yeah.
appeal to, like, the market impetus, because sometimes that seems to be the only reason or way that these people can sort of understand these sort of things,
Yeah.
but they still don't even get it when it's framed in that respect, it seems. So yeah.
Right. It does feel like there's more to it because we know like hey, there's a lot of economic incentive to take the right approach
Yeah.
um and focus on rehabilitation instead of policing, but there's something else there, and I think it just has to do with the traditional conservative colonial mindset is that if police are not there to keep people in line, then they're going to steal bread. But really
Exactly.
it's like,
Yeah.
oh well, if they could afford to buy bread, I'm sure they would. Right? It's like it's just like why push people to the situation where they're forced to act in a way that is counterintuitive to a healthy society. um why not just help them make those choices by making sure that the systems are in place to support them, to rehabilitate them when they are in bad shape, to address their essential healthcare needs in a way that doesn't bankrupt them or put them out on the street, and it could be any one of us as well. I always say that we are closer to being an unhoused person than we are closer to being the next Galen Weston, right? And
Mm.
because that's how our system works, the ability to move up in life is difficult, but the system here is like constantly trying to like push us down.
Yeah. Things aren't getting cheaper. That's for sure.
Right, things aren't getting cheaper. What's
No.
up with that?
That's
Well, on that note, we have reached an hour, and
Yeah.
it's been a great chat this
Yeah.
week.
Yeah.
So
As
thanks you
always.
so much for your time, everyone in chat. We appreciate you. Everyone listening in the future, we appreciate you. People considering to be our future sponsors of the podcast, we appreciate you. And we'll see you hopefully at the farmers market on Saturday.
Yeah. Yeah. Hope to see you there. Take care, everyone. Take care, everyone in chat. See you, Danny.
See you, Sebastian.